Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for returning promptly. All jurors and alternates are present. Mr. Durst is here with Mr. DeGuerin and Mr. Chesnoff. Mr. Lewis. I saw Mr. Lewis is in the back. And we have Mr. Lewin, Mr. Bailey, and Mr. Milius, Mr. Miata. Mr. Henderson. Last but not least, Mr. Timothy Henderson. You may resume your examination of the defendant.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Durst, you've been previously asked questions about the bow saw that was used to dismember Morris. Do you recall some of those questions?
Yeah,
And you previously testified that that bow saw came from Morris Black's closet, correct?
correct.
And you've also previously testified that the new bow saw that was found in your Honda CRV when you were arrested on October 9th, that was a bow saw that you had purchased in New Orleans, correct?
Correct.
And the bow saw that you used to dismember Morris, you believe that you threw that out with all of Morris's body parts, correct?
The bow saw,
Yes.
I believe I threw it out, but not with the body parts. I believe I threw it out in the trash.
Well, you're aware, correct, Mr. Durst, that there was a bow saw covering, meaning like packaging, that was found with the dismembered body materials, correct?
I guess I remember that.
So my question to you is, Mr. Durst, other than the bow saw that you found in Morris's closet and the bow saw that you bought in New Orleans, are there any other bow saws that were involved in this case at the time that Morris Black was killed and dismembered?
I can't think of any.
So, I just want to be clear, you've also mentioned that years ago in Vermont you used to use a bow saw, correct?
Correct.
So, the bow saw that you used was not a bow saw that you purchased at Chalmers, correct?
Correct.
Because you never bought any bow saws at Chalmers, correct?
Correct.
Now, you are aware from the testimony of Mario Sacacci, who was the manager at Chalmers, that the only bow saw that was bought near the time of Morris's death was the bow saw that was bought by Everett Ward, who worked at Farmers Marine and who purchased the bow saw from Chalmers, correct?
Correct.
And in fact, you actually years later would use the name Everett Ward, which you learned about from trial in Galveston. That would be your alias in New Orleans.
Correct.
And you would use that in 2015 when you were checked into the JW Marriott and arrested, correct?
Correct.
And so, Mr. Durst, you would agree that if you had purchased a bow saw yourself, bought one, prior to Morris Black being killed, that would certainly be highly incriminating, correct?
Oh, gosh. If I had purchased a bow saw, okay, I'll say yes.
And Mr. Durst, and your testimony is you did not buy any bow saw that you're aware of anywhere near the time that Morris Black was killed, meaning before that time. The one you bought was afterwards, after the dismemberment, and that was the new one that was in your car that you purchased in New Orleans, correct?
The one I bought in New Orleans.
That was in your car.
Yeah,
And that was brand new, never been used, correct?
correct.
So, Mr. Durst, I would like you to explain Do we have the clip first? It's going to be the one with the in any ways clip. Can we play that first, please?
This will be from People's 269.
P69.
When I went back and I realized I couldn't lift it, I couldn't drag it out, I was going to have to dismember it. And then I went to Chalmers hardware store, and now Morris had tools. He had saws and axes, a giant axe. I don't think he had a bow saw. Anyway, I went and bought a bow saw. I got a bunch of garbage bags and stuff like that, and went back to the house. And
You can stop it.
I got more stoned and more drunk, and I dismembered the corpse primarily.
You said, anyway, I went to Chalmers and I bought a bow saw. Mr. Durst, how can you explain that? That's after Morris Black, you're saying, that's after Morris Black was killed, and you've denied ever having bought any bow saw at Chalmers, correct?
Well, all two paragraphs are wrong. I say Morris had tools, he had a saw. In the same sentence, I say he did not have a bow saw. And I say I bought a bow saw at Chalmers,
Stop.
and that's incorrect.
Okay, so you're saying, even though you said you bought a bow saw at Chalmers, that's incorrect. Is that right?
Correct.
Now, Mr. Durst, you're aware, and Mr. Sakatchi's testimony was, there was only one bow saw bought within 2 weeks of Morris Black's death, and it was by Everett Ward. So you would agree, Mr. Durst, that you could not have bought a bow saw at Chalmers after Morris Black's death, correct?
Correct.
I want to play another clip for you, Mr. Durst.
I mean, the whole thing is contradictory. The whole 3 paragraphs I said to Andrew are contradictory.
Right, an alternative explanation would be, Mr. Durst, that you cannot keep your lies straight and that you are telling partial truths about having bought a saw at Chalmers, but you are lying about when you bought it. You would agree that's an alternative explanation, correct?
Sustained the way you phrased it. Any part of that would have been.
Okay, Mr. Durst.
An alternative is that I misspoke. I was confused when I
You may.
spoke to Andrew.
Mr. Durst, an alternative, though, would be, correct, that in fact you bought a saw, a bow saw at Chalmers, but you bought it before Morris Black was killed, not after, correct?
I thought you just said that Chalmers only sold one bow saw, and that was to Everett Ward.
Correct, within 2 weeks of Morris Black's murder. So that would mean that you would have had to have purchased it more than 2 weeks before Morris Black's murder.
Somehow it seems to me the Galveston police are more competent than that, and they would have checked more than just 2 weeks.
Well, the testimony was, Mr. Durst, that was the only records that Mr. Sakatchi was able to verify. So the question for you is going to be, would you agree that given the testimony, Mr. Durst, that if you bought a saw at Chalmers, it would had to have been more than 2 weeks before Morris Black's death? I know you're denying it, but would you agree that's what it would have to be?
if they only checked for 2 weeks, that's what it would have to be if I bought a bow saw at Chalmers, which I did not do.
Right, so if you bought one, it would have to be more than 2 weeks before Morris was killed, correct?
Or 2 weeks after.
Well, Mr. Durst, you've already testified that you did not buy a bow saw afterwards from Chalmers. You've already testified that you ended up using the bow saw that was in Morris Black's closet to dismember him. So if you had bought a bow saw 2 weeks after Morris Black was killed, what on earth would you be using it for?
I don't think I bought a bow saw 2 weeks after Morris Black died.
So you would agree, Mr. Durst, that if you bought a bow saw at Chalmers, it would have to be at least 2 weeks before Morris Black was killed, correct?
Correct.
And Mr. Durst, would you agree that if you bought a bow saw at Chalmers 2 weeks before Morris Black was killed, then it would not be to dismember Morris Black's body in a murder that you did not know was going to happen, correct?
Overruled.
You got so many ifs in here, I don't know what to say anymore.
Let me re-ask the question. Actually, let me play you a second clip first, Mr. Durst, see if this helps. Clip B.
This is going to be from yesterday's testimony. I'd like to mark it as People's 344, transcript 344A.
344A.
And it's your contention that Morris Black happened to have the same kind of saw, a bow saw, that you yourself had extensive experience using. Is that correct?
I think there are different kinds of bow saws. I have no idea if Morris's bow saw is the same as the one I bought at Chalmers.
Well, Mr. Durst, you very clearly said yesterday that you did not know whether the saw that Morris Black had, the one you used for the dismemberment, was the same one that you bought at Chalmers. That's what you said, correct?
That's what I said.
And you would agree, Mr. Durst, you've just now stated a moment ago that if you bought a bow saw at Chalmers, it had to be at least 2 weeks before Morris Black was killed, correct? That's what you just testified to, correct?
Correct.
So, Mr. Durst, wouldn't you agree then that in buying a bow saw 2 weeks before Morris Black was killed, that the only reasonable inference that can be drawn is that you bought that bow saw in advance knowing that you were going to kill Morris Black and dismember him?
Overruled.
No,
Well, explain then, Mr. Durst, why you would have purchased that saw.
well, first of all, there's no evidence that I did purchase a saw. And second of all, there could be about 80 explanations.
Well, let's take each point you just made. First of all, there is evidence that you purchased a saw. You said so twice. Agreed?
I said so twice, and I was wrong twice.
Okay. And then you said there could be 80 reasons why you would purchase a saw.
Yeah, maybe I wanted to cut. Maybe I wanted to saw logs.
So, were there a lot of logs that you were sawing in your apartment at Galveston?
Not in it, but certainly there were a lot of trees around.
So you had decided that apparently you were going to buy a saw to randomly go around Galveston sawing trees?
I'm throwing out a possibility.
Yeah, when you say you're throwing out a possibility, Mr. Durst, does that sound reasonable to you?
Well, first of all, since I did not buy a bow saw at Chalmers, the whole thing is hypothetical.
Well, when you say you didn't buy one, Mr. Durst, so what you're saying is you want the jury to disregard 2 times when you stated, once under oath, that you bought a bow saw at Chalmers, and you're saying, you know what, just forget about that. Is that correct?
Sustained.
What is it your testimony that that was another mistake and not perjury?
Correct, that was a mistake.
So, Mr. Durst, since you've said that we have 3 bow saws. We have the bow saw that you found allegedly in Morris's closet. We have the brand new bow saw, which is in the back of your with your CRV, which you've stated you did not use to dismember Morris. It's brand new. And now we have a 3rd bow saw, the one that you bought. Can you explain, Mr. Durst, why you have so many bow saws so close to the time that Morris Black is killed and dismembered?
Overruled.
I did
Overruled.
explain why I purchased a bow saw in New Orleans.
Yes, you explain you've given an explanation that you bought the bow saw in New Orleans to saw a tree that was blocking a road. But you have not explained why it was that you purchased this other bow saw when you've testified that the bow saw you used to dismember Morris Black was the one that you found in his closet. So that 3rd bow saw, why'd you buy it?
I think in the paragraph, or 2 paragraphs, where you played me talking to Andrew about bow saws, I contradicted myself 2 or 3 times. One place I say Morris Black had a saw. And then in another place I say Morris Black did not have a bow saw. And the fact of the matter is, if I was planning on killing Morris Black and dismembering him with a bow saw, I would have gotten the bow saw from his closet. I would not have had to buy it.
Well, Mr. Durst, that assumes that there actually was a bow saw in Morris Black's closet, correct?
Well, I thought you wanted me to find all these bow saws. Yes, there was a bow saw in his closet.
You would agree, Mr. Durst, that the explanations for the bow saw, there are certain things that we know and certain things that we're dependent upon your testimony about, correct?
There are certain things that we know.
I'll give you an example. We know, Mr. Durst, that a bow saw was used to cut up Morris Black. You've agreed to that, correct?
Well, I have not agreed to that. The forensics who examined Morris Black said he was dismembered by an axe and a saw. I do not think at any point they opined what kind of saw it was.
You have testified, though, Mr. Durst, that you used a bow saw on Morris Black, and what you've said is, and where the contradiction is where you got that bow saw, correct?
I don't think I've testified that I used a bow saw. I think I've testified that I used an axe, and the forensics said I used a saw in addition to the bow saw.
So is it
in addition to the axe.
So is it your testimony right now that you did not use, you cannot remember if you used a bow saw to dismember Morris Black? Is that your testimony?
Correct.
And is it your further testimony, Mr. Durst, that you cannot remember throwing away packaging for a bow saw with Morris Black's body parts?
Correct.
I want you to assume that there was packaging for a bow saw that was recovered with Morris Black's body parts. Would you agree, Mr. Durst, that the saw that you recovered, that you got from Morris Black, it was not brand new, correct? It wasn't in a package, was it?
I have no idea.
So you don't remember, as you sit here right now, you can't remember whether you went in Morris's closet and it was a brand new unopened bow saw or whether it was a bow saw that was already opened?
I don't remember if it was in packaging.
Mr. Durst, would you agree that other than your story about needing a bow saw to cut a log down a tree on a logging road, that there is no other reason why you should have had a bow saw unopened in the back of your CRV? Would you agree?
If you gave me a little time, I could probably come up with another reason why someone might want to have a bow saw.
Did you literally just say if I gave you more time, you could come up with something?
Yeah, I could think of something or other that someone might want to do with a bow saw.
Well, Mr. Durst, would you agree that what you might have wanted to do with a bow saw is head up to Gilberta Najami's place where you had the map and her address and dismember her body? What's the objection, Your Honor?
I haven't heard it. 352. Overruled.
Would you agree, Mr. Durst, that that certainly would be an inference somebody could draw?
Someone like you might draw that inference.
And is your testimony that that inference is unreasonable?
Correct.
And would you agree that it also might be a reasonable inference that you might have had that brand new bow saw to go Igor your brother Douglas?
Is that a question?
That's a question.
No.
Okay, let's talk for a moment. You would agree that almost every interview that you've done in this case, the interviews with Jarecki and Smerling, is what I'm referring to, those were against the advice of numerous lawyers you consulted, correct?
Steve Rabinowitz, Stuart Altman. I don't think I spoke to anybody else about it.
Is it fair, Mr. Durst, that the lawyers that you have spoken to about doing the interviews in this case uniformly told you don't do it, correct?
Correct.
But even after you decided to do the interviews,
Oh, Ted Simon, there's another lawyer I spoke to.
even when you decided to do the interviews, you had Steve Rabinowitz with you, correct? Rabinowitz was with you when you did the interviews, correct? With Jarecki and Smerling.
Correct.
And you authorized your attorneys, Dick DeGuerin and Chip Lewis, to speak to be interviewed by Andrew Jarecki, correct?
I did more than that. I encouraged them to.
And in fact, they were both interviewed by Mr. Jarecki, correct?
I am aware of that.
And that was done with your permission and encouragement, correct?
Correct.
Now, one moment here, Mr. Durst. And isn't it true that at one point you left a voicemail with Andrew Jarecki stating, "Hi Andrew, it's Bob Durst. So I met with the lawyers and they threw all the stuff. So far they've refused to let me send you the emails that I previously sent you because they say it would ruin privilege. I'm sure you've heard that before. Anyway, you have the email and that's between us. I'm also getting ready to send you the disc, which seemingly shows just as little as the emails. So unless it shows something of interest, more than me walking up a stoop, keep it." Do you recall sending that kind of email to Andrew Jarecki?
I have to read this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Durst, despite the complaints that you have had about Andrew Jarecki and Mark Smerling, have you ever said, Mr. Durst, that the things that you said, other than the fact that you said you were given a script, but that the things that you told them were untrue?
Yes.
Isn't it true,
I
Mr.
even said that to your favorite witness Nick Chabon.
Well, Mr. Durst, didn't you say when I interviewed you in New Orleans and you mentioned that you were on methamphetamine at the time, allegedly, you said that I was on methamphetamine and I'm explaining to you why I did the interview. But in essence, you said, I'm not saying that anything I said in those interviews was untrue. That's what you said, correct?
If that's what I said, that's what I said.
Well, I want you to assume you said that, Mr. Durst. Can you explain then how that would be consistent with the idea that the stuff that you told Andrew Jarecki was not true?
Just because I did not tell you that it was not true does not mean that it was not true.
Well, Mr. Durst, isn't it true that the reason that you did not relate that the interviews were untrue was because at that point in time you had not dreamed up the testimony you were going to give in this courtroom yet, correct?
Well, what I'm dreaming now is that I've got a dialogue box on my
It's, I think, a battery message. Ready? Switch it out, yes. Thank you. It still has a blue box in the right corner of it.
Should come out.
Okay.
no way.
There's a message in the center that'll go off when you begin
Yes.
transcribing.
So whatever your question was, it's not here.
Okay, I'll ask it again. You agree, Mr. Durst, that during the 2015 interview that you had with myself and detectives, that you said that although you had been on methamphetamine at the time that you did the interviews with Jarecki, that you were not saying that anything you told him was not true. You were merely saying that being on the methamphetamine was allegedly what caused you to agree to do the interviews, correct?
I was stating a fact when I said I was on methamphetamine, and I repeatedly told you that during our interview, I lied to you a whole bunch of times.
Now, my question, though, Mr. Durst, is when you brought up the fact that you were allegedly on methamphetamine when you were interviewed by Andrew Jarecki, you made it clear that you were not saying the things I told him were untrue. You said, I'm just telling you that's why I did the interview, correct? I can play the clip if you want.
That's not necessary.
What's that?
That is not necessary.
Okay.
but I still don't know what the question is.
You told myself and the detectives during the 2015 interview that although you were on methamphetamine when you were interviewed by Andrew Jarecki, that your answers were still truthful and accurate. You were merely explaining that the methamphetamine was the reason you agreed to do the interviews, correct?
Correct.
During when you were watching All Good Things, Mr. Durst, you agree that it portrayed you as responsible for the killings of 3 different people, correct?
It showed Morris Black killing Susan Berman.
But it showed his character doing that at your direction, correct?
I don't think it showed that at all. It showed Morris Black killing Susan Berman. I do not remember any scene where it shows me telling Morris Black to go to 1527 Benedict Canyon Drive and kill the lady that lives there.
Okay, do you agree, Mr. Durst, that at the very least, the movie explicitly had you killing your wife, Kathy, and Morris Black?
You may speak to Mr. DeGuerin. Go ahead.
What's that?
Overruled. They can confer.
Okay. Correct, Mr. Durst?
It shows somebody walking up behind Susan Berman and shooting her in the head. It does not show me as Ryan Gosling walking up behind Susan Berman and shooting her in the head.
So listen to my question, Mr. Durst. Listen to my question.
Right. No, the jury understands it's a dramatic film, and it's only his comments afterwards that are relevant. And they've already been instructed, and I'll instruct them that again. So the objection's overruled with that understanding of the limited purpose of anything about this film. Go ahead.
Mr. Durst, the movie portrayed you as, at the very least, having killed your wife and the Morris Black character, correct?
Your Honor, it would be heard, please.
No.
I'm not trying to upset you, but I'd like to be heard.
Your Honor, there's no reason at this point. I have very little time.
I don't think so.
Well, you've had 12 days, so,
No.
Your Honor, it would be heard, please.
Very well, Mr. Chestnut, though it's Mr. DeGuerin is designated to speak, not you, but all right.
We're in this together, Your Honor.
No, I know, but it's rule. It's a
Thank you, Your Honor.
all right. The objection's overruled.
Mr. Durst, please listen to my question as closely as you can. You agree that the movie shows the character based on you, at the very least, killing the character based on Kathy and the character based on Morris, correct?
Well, sitting here right now, I don't remember what it shows about Morris being killed. In terms of Kathy, it very subtly shows Kathy finding the dog's bandana with blood on it in the garbage. And then it shows Ryan Gosling showing his father something in the trunk of the car that is supposed to be Kathy.
Mr. Durst, you would agree that your response to watching that movie on video when you're doing the DVD commentary was not to get upset at the part of the movie where the character based on you kills Kathy. It was not to get upset in the movie where the character based on Morris kills Susan Berman at your direction. It was not to get upset at the point in the movie where the character based on you kills Morris Black. What is the only time during your viewing of the movie on video being filmed by Andrew Jarecki where you got upset and made an unsolicited comment about something that bothered you?
When I got upset, because it showed me killing our dog.
And Mr. Durst, isn't it true that the reason that you got upset about the part of the movie that shows you killing the dogs is because that did not happen, correct?
I had previously been accused repeatedly of killing Morris Black, of killing Susan Berman, and of killing Kathy. I had never been accused of killing a dog.
And Mr. Durst, you literally said when Andrew Jarecki, do you have the clip to Jarecki and Smerling regarding Igor clip, if you can bring that up when you have a chance? Do you recall saying to Andrew Jarecki something to the effect of, now Andrew, that really bothers me, the idea that I could kill Igor, that I do not like. You said something similar to that, correct?
I felt that way, yes, and I don't doubt I said it.
But you did not say anything similar to that relating to Susan, Kathy, or Morris, correct?
I had repeatedly been accused.
Motion to strike is non-responsive.
Stricken.
I'm not asking you why you said what you said. That can be covered on redirect. I'm asking you what you did or did not say. Did you, in response to viewing the character based on you, either killing or being responsible in the movie for the deaths of the Kathy Durst character, the Susan Berman character, and the Morris Black character, did you say while you were watching the movie, Andrew, the idea that I could kill my wife, Andrew, the idea that I could kill my friend Susan Berman, Andrew, the idea that I could kill Morris Black, I do not like? Did you say anything similar to that?
No.
Now, Mr. Durst, you would agree that in terms of your answers, even during the filming of the interviews that eventually became the Jinx, that you have a habit of talking to yourself and practicing what you're going to say, correct?
No.
During your December 2010 interviews with Jarecki and Smerling, you were asked about whether you had intentionally lied during your testimony in Galveston, correct?
I don't remember that, but I don't doubt it.
At the time, Mr. Durst, isn't it true that you strenuously denied committing such perjury, even though you've now admitted that's exactly what you did, correct?
I told two lies. I said I was in Northern California when I was in Southern California, and I said I did not write the cadaver note.
Mr. Durst, weren't you picked up on December 13, 2010, while still wearing a live mic, practicing your upcoming answer to a question that you knew was coming?
No.
Isn't it in fact true, Mr. Durst, that you were practicing for the question that you did not intentionally lie during your Galveston testimony?
No.
RD 535, 121310, page 704, lines 15 through 24.
This is people 270, transcript 270A, page 30.
270 and 270A.
I'm gonna start
on Mr. Smith?
Issue 270A also, to display it?
Yes.
Display 270A?
We have one with them both together.
Okay. 270A.
Don't worry about it.
Hold on one second.
I don't want to blow anyone's ears out, so we're just going to have to stand next to him. Mr. Anderson, stand next to him.
Why are we not hearing the audio?
The audio is very low, Mr. Durst.
I'm not agreeing that what I'm saying is what's printed
I
here.
didn't say much. I talked about Connecticut. No, when you were talking to yourself.
Mr. Durst, isn't it true that in fact, while you were doing these interviews, that as in that example, there was a time where you ended up being caught on a live microphone practicing what your answer was going to be?
I did not hear any audio of what you just showed me.
You saw, Mr. Durst, correct, you saw what the wording was in the audio, correct? You were able to read that writing, correct, where it said, "I did not purposefully lie," etc. It was on the screen. Did you see that?
Well, I saw the writing on the screen, but whether that writing has anything to do with what I was saying to myself, I have no idea, since you are not playing the audio.
So I want you to assume, for the purposes of this
I'm
question,
not going to assume that all that writing is what I said.
well, you don't have a choice. Listen to my question. I want you to assume for a moment, on the hypothetical, Mr. Durst, that in fact, that writing is what you said.
Mr. DeGuerin objects to your statement that he doesn't have a choice. Though it is true, you must answer the question that you are asked. So start again, Mr.
Sure. Mr. Durst, I want you to assume, for the purpose of this question, that the writing accurately reflected what you were saying, and that that includes you saying in a low voice to yourself, "I did not knowingly, purposefully lie," etc. Do you understand what I'm asking you to do?
Yeah, I understand what you're asking me to do, and I'm saying it's just wrong. I should not be asked to assume something That is probably wrong.
Well,
Probably I said other stuff, and you came up with this writing to impeach me.
so Mr. Durst, if there's a question that I ask that is improper,
Yeah,
then there will be an
it's
objection.
true.
Mr. Lewin, just read your question.
All right. So, Mr. Durst, isn't it true that what you were doing in that last scene we just showed was you were practicing what you were going to say to a question you knew that was coming that involved whether or not you had perjured yourself in Galveston, correct?
I have no idea what I was saying because you have refused to play the audio. Why are you refusing to play the audio?
All right, let's move on to RD 009, please. 31515, page 29, lines 11 through 23. This is regarding, Mr. Durst, your statement about being under the influence of methamphetamine during the interviews with Jarecki.
This is the interviews of Mr. Lewin, People's 291.
People's 291.
I'm not trying to say that my answers were wrong. I'm just trying to say that I was blah, 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 during the thing. I think that what I said were the correct answers to the questions. But we were talking before about why did I do it anyway? I think the reason I did it had to be because I was speeding.
Oh, okay, so you're saying you're not disputing that you answered this
No,
stuff?
I'm happy to live by the answer.
Right. Mr. Durst, you agree that in that clip you said that the answers that you gave were the correct answers? Go to the top of the clip of the writing, please. You said, I'm not trying to say my answers were wrong, and then at the end you said something to the effect of, I'm happy to live by the answers. You said all three of those things, correct?
Correct.
And at no point did you say that, no, the actual substance of what I told Andrew Jarecki was untrue, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Durst, I want to talk about Charlie Bagley for a moment. Mr. Bagley is someone that you know pretty well, correct?
Correct.
When did you first start speaking to him?
Shortly after my Galveston trial.
And you agree that no one ever forced you to talk to him. It was 100% a voluntary decision on your part?
Correct.
And you agree that the vast majority of those conversations were on the record, correct?
I thought they were all on the record.
And how many times do you think you've spoken to him? Is it likely dozens?
Correct.
And when you were talking to him, you were aware from the start of your conversations with him that you had been lying about everything related to where you were at the time of Susan Berman's murder, correct?
Incorrect.
What is incorrect about that?
When I was talking to him, I was not telling him any lies.
Well, Mr. Durst, hadn't you told him that you had not come down to Los Angeles at the time that Susan was murdered?
I don't know, I might have.
Hadn't you told him, Mr. Durst, that you'd been truthful in your Galveston testimony?
If he asked me, I would have told him I'd been truthful.
And that would have been a lie, correct?
2 lies.
Now, Mr. Durst, at the time that you were talking to Charlie Bagley, that was after you'd been acquitted in Morris Black's death, and so you knew that you could not be prosecuted for his murder again, correct?
Correct.
But you knew there was no statute of limitations on murder with relation to Kathy and Susan, correct?
Correct.
So you were also aware that every lawyer you had spoken to was telling you not to talk to the media, correct?
That's not correct. A lot of people encouraged me to talk to the media because they said I was getting a bad rap.
You mean lawyers encourage you to talk to the media? I said lawyers, just so you know.
Nick Scarpetta
And
loved Susan Berman and thought I should give interviews.
Mr. Durst, but you agree that you were talking to Charlie Bagley at a time when you had already perjured yourself in Galveston, and at a time when you knew that you had written the cadaver note but were lying about it, correct?
Correct.
So what made you talk to him? Why would you do that? Was it cockiness or arrogance? Why did you do it?
I thought he would write something fair and positive about me.
It's, we need to take a brief break, a quick bathroom break.
Okay.
It's a 5-minute break
Okay.
only. Don't converse among yourselves with anyone else. You want to put something on the record
Yes.
about a stipulation?
Yes, we have reached a stipulation with the defense regarding the issue with Sarah Kaufman and the statement from Galveston Jail. What Mr. DeGuerin and I have agreed to is that I will read into the record, it won't be a written stipulation, I will read into the record what we have agreed upon, which is simply the transcript of the part of the interview that goes to that issue, and that Mr. DeGuerin is agreeable to that. Is that correct, Mr. DeGuerin? That's correct. Will the court
Thank
accept
you.
that stipulation?
Yes.
I just need to make sure that I could call off any scheduling issues. Thank you.
Yes. Here they come. Jurors coming in. Mr. Lewin is present with his colleagues. You may resume your cross-examination.
Mr. Durst, isn't it true that on February 6, 2015, 2 days before the Jinx miniseries started, you told Charlie Bagley regarding the Susan Berman investigation, quote, "It's a long time ago. Some DA would have to commence a major budget-busting investigation. I don't see that happening," end quote. Correct?
Correct.
So you thought that in essence, Mr. Durst, you were in the clear regarding Susan Berman, is that right?
Correct.
Now, previously, Mr. Durst, I've asked you questions about your possession of firearms in Pennsylvania. Do you recall those questions?
Some of them.
I want to now talk about the fact that you were arrested in New Orleans with a firearm. Do you recall that?
I recall it.
Why did you have a gun in New Orleans in
I was going to
2015?
shoot myself in the head.
And Mr. Durst, how many bullets did you have in the gun?
I have no idea.
Isn't it correct, Mr. Durst, that the gun was fully loaded and that you had a second magazine full of ammunition inside of your hotel room?
It was a revolver. Revolvers don't have magazines.
I want to take that one moment. Might be wrong on that. Durst, you might have me on that. That's my fault, Mr. Durst. Thank you. You had 5 rounds inside of the revolver. I believe was it a .38? Am I correct?
It was a .38 and it had 5 rounds, one of which was shot.
And what was that? Why was 1 round expended?
I took the gun out on my balcony at 2520 Robin Hood Street and I shot it to see if the gun worked.
And Mr. Durst, why did you need again 5 rounds in the gun to kill yourself?
It holds 5 rounds. I put a round in each of the chambers.
But Mr. Durst, if you're planning on killing yourself, you're well aware that you can rotate the cylinder. You only need one round to kill yourself, correct?
Yeah, you could play Russian roulette.
So, Mr. Durst, if you're planning on killing yourself, why did you have the extremely expensive latex mask when you were arrested in New Orleans?
Well, I don't know if it was extremely expensive. The guy I know who I called up when I decided to go into hiding after the 5th episode of the Jinx, I told him I needed a car and I needed a gun. He showed up at my apartment several hours later with the keys to a car and a gun, and he said, I'm throwing the mask in because maybe you'll use it. And he said, you're making a big mistake. I know you. You cannot go into hiding. How are you going to get your prescriptions? How are you going to visit your doctors regularly if you are in hiding? Don't go into hiding.
Wait, Mr. Durst, were you going into hiding or were you planning on killing yourself?
I was going into hiding and I was planning on killing myself too.
Wait, so can you explain how you're going to go into hiding and kill yourself? Wouldn't that be an A or B choice?
Well, I could go into hiding and kill myself any time.
So isn't it true, Mr. Durst, that you actually weren't planning on killing yourself? You were planning on taking all the money that Susan Giordano had sent you, and you were planning on fleeing the country with your more than $100,000, your gun, and your mask, correct?
I think that's the answer to your question. Or no, I was not planning on going to Cuba.
You were planning on taking the money that you had, the mask that you had, the gun that you had, and you were planning on going into hiding, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Durst, you testified this morning that you have perjured yourself 5 times. Do you recall that?
Correct.
What are the 5?
Oh, I don't know. 2 of them I've repeated repeatedly at the Galveston trial. I said I was in Northern California when I was in Southern California. The second one was when I said I had not written the cadaver note. I imagine I could come up with 3 more if I tried.
Well, so when you said 5, that was just kind of a rough estimate, is that correct?
Extremely rough estimate.
And would you agree, Mr. Durst, that if we looked, it very likely is far greater than 5?
Are we talking about perjuring myself? Or
Yes.
telling lies?
And let me define it. Perjury, minor perjury, minor perjury, and minor perjury.
I thought perjury was when you told a lie under oath.
Correct.
So then lies I might have told not under oath are not perjury.
So how
They're
many,
just ordinary lies.
right, how many lies under oath? You said 5, so I'm just asking, would you agree that it might be, if we actually counted them
I
up?
thought you asked me about perjury.
Yes, how many perjurious
I said
lies?
5.
5. So I'm asking, so what are the 5? You named 2, what are the other 3?
I mentioned 2. Now let's see, what else? When else was I under oath? The only time I was under oath, other than the Galveston trial, was during this trial.
Right, so the question originally was how many lies under oath, how many instances of perjury do you believe you've committed during this trial? And I believe you said 5. So I'm asking, what are those 5?
I would have to think about it.
Go ahead.
can't think through.
All right, Mr. Durst. It's your sworn testimony that you have no idea what happened to Kathy, correct?
Correct.
You have at times testified that you're not even sure if she's dead, correct?
I have said the only evidence that she is dead is the fact that there is no evidence that she is living.
So as you sit here right now, having gone through this trial, we're almost at the end here, would you agree, Mr. Durst, that all of the evidence in this case suggests that Kathy is dead?
Suggests. What is suggests?
The reasonable inference from the evidence in this case is that Kathy, your wife, is dead.
I just said the evidence that says she's dead is the fact that there is no evidence that she is alive. There is no evidence specifically that she is dead.
So when you're sitting there, Mr. Durst, if I were to ask you a very simple question, as you sit here today, do you believe that your wife is dead?
Yeah,
As you sit here today, do you believe that your wife died at or very near the time that she disappeared?
I have no idea.
And you've also testified that you are unaware of any crime scene, correct? You said, I don't know where there's a crime scene with Kathy.
I agree.
You've testified that you did not kill her at the South Salem house, correct?
Correct.
You've testified that you did not dismember her at the South Salem house, correct?
Correct.
You've testified that the blue light that your neighbor Ruth Mayer saw, that does not exist, correct?
The blue light was her imagination.
And, Mr. Durst, you have also testified that you have no idea if Kathy did die, what happened to her, correct?
Correct.
You don't know if she drowned somewhere, correct?
Correct.
And in fact, when you have been pressed regarding explaining where she is, you have said you have no idea. Is that correct?
The only idea I ever had was related to cocaine. She was buying lots of cocaine, and people who sell cocaine tend to be difficult people.
Right. And, Mr. Durst, you have also said, with respect to Kathy's death, you've also said that if you had killed her, you would lie about it. You wouldn't tell us, correct?
I would not tell you, correct.
So, Mr. Durst, if you have no idea what happened to Kathy and where she is, can you please explain why you said this morning? Please play A.
This will be People 345, transcript 345A.
345 and 345A.
You are now saying that the point of that was you're trying to get a plea deal, correct?
Correct.
And a plea deal, the point of a plea deal is that in the end, in order for your plea deal to go through, you have to give us what you're offering on your end, and we have to give you what you're requesting on our end. Is that correct?
Overruled.
I never said I knew what happened to Susan. I never said I knew where Kathy was buried.
Stop. Mr. Durst, why did you say you never said you knew where Kathy was buried? How do you know Kathy's buried at all?
Seemed like a logical step.
Well, Mr. Durst, would you agree that you talking about the fact that Kathy was buried would seem, Mr. Durst, you would agree, to be implying that you know, in fact, that she was buried, correct?
Overruled.
I was telling you what I thought you wanted to hear.
Wait, you're not saying you were trying to get a plea deal this morning while we were in court, are you? That's this morning.
That's this morning. So when I said buried, I misspoke.
Well, when you say you misspoke, Mr. Durst, was I talking about where Kathy was buried?
You were talking about a hypothetical if she was dead.
Did I mention her being buried at all?
No,
Who's the only person that mentioned her being buried?
me.
Can you explain, Mr. Durst, how you could have said that Kathy Durst was buried if, in fact, you're not the one that buried her?
I'm not the one who buried her. I don't know that she's dead, and I don't know that she's buried.
So you would agree, Mr. Durst, you cannot explain that statement that you just made this morning, correct?
Correct.
By the way, Mr. Durst, if, in fact, you did slip up when you said buried, and that was, in essence, a confession unintentionally, would you admit right now, yeah, you know what? Hey, John, I slipped up. I guess I kind of confessed when I didn't mean to. Would you tell us that?
I would tell you.
What's that?
I would tell you that I should not have used the word buried.
So, to answer my question, though, you would not tell us, Mr. Durst, if, in fact, in using the word buried, you had inadvertently confessed, correct? You would deny that to the grave, correct?
I would deny that the word buried has any meaning whatsoever.
And Mr. Durst, as you sit here today, is it your testimony that you using the word buried had, quote, no meaning whatsoever? Is that your testimony?
Correct.
Mr. Durst, does that explanation, does that sound credible to you?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Durst, I want to talk about what has been referred to as the bathroom audio. You're aware of this, correct?
Correct.
On April 18, 2012, at the end of the interview, when you were confronted with the Sereb note and the cadaver note and could not say which one you had wrote, which one you had written, which one you had not written, what was your state of mind when that happened, when they confronted you with it?
My state of mind.
How did you feel when Andrew Jarecki is showing you, here's the Sereb note, here's the cadaver note,
Yeah,
which one did you not write?
I felt like he had caught me writing a cadaver note.
And you walked in to the bathroom right after that, and before the door could even close, what did you say?
I don't know.
You said, there it is, you're caught, correct?
I accept that.
And Mr. Durst, you would agree that while you are in the bathroom, you are trying to go through your mind what's going to happen, correct?
I don't know what I was going through my mind.
Well, you have a habit when you get nervous of talking to yourself, correct?
I talk to myself when I'm nervous and when I'm not nervous.
And when you're nervous, Mr. Durst, you tend to talk to yourself even more, correct? You testified to that previously.
I don't know that I talk to myself more when I'm nervous or more when I'm not nervous.
And you would agree that while you were in the bathroom, Mr. Durst, you said the words, killed them all, of course, correct?
I think what I said was, they'll all think I killed them all.
Mr. Durst, you've heard, can we cue it up, please?
You want just that section?
Yes.
This will be part of People's 278.
278.
I want you to listen, Mr. Durst.
I'm starting it at 356.
Okay.
Of course.
Sorry.
I'm gonna go back because
Yep.
Kill them all. Of course.
Mr. Durst, do you agree that you said those words, those 5 words, killed them all, of course?
I think I said what I just said I said. They'll all think I killed them all, of course.
So you think that you added, they'll all think before the words, I killed them all, of course, is that correct?
That's correct.
Please play it again. Please play it right before, and I want you to listen very carefully. I want you to tell me when you hear any of the words you just described.
Mr. Balian?
Is the court reporter is transcribing off of the audio or off of the actual text on the screen?
Are you able to transcribe what you hear rather than what you read? And that's what you do? Okay, thank you.
okay, I'm gonna press play.
Kill them all. Of course.
Mr. Durst, is it your testimony that there were any words at all that you said before the word killed that are on that recording?
I don't know what's on the recording. I remember saying, they'll all think I killed them all, of course.
Do you understand, Mr. Durst, that your attorneys have already stipulated that what we just played is unaltered, unedited footage? You understand that, correct?
Well, I don't understand that, now you're telling me. But I don't think the mic picked up everything I said. Looking at the rest of it, it cries out that I was saying a lot more stuff than the mic picked up.
Would you agree, Mr. Durst, that saying, "There it is, you're caught," as soon as you go into the bathroom is very incriminating?
No.
Okay? Would you agree, Mr. Durst, that at least what is played, what we could hear, that the words you just heard, you agree, the words you heard say killed them all, of course, correct?
I think killed them all, of course, was part of a sentence.
So that's not my question. In what you just heard, what you just listened to, did you hear anything more at that point other than the 5 words, killed them all, of course?
The fact that the mic only picked up the words, killed them all, of course, does not mean there were not more words spoken.
So listen to my question, Mr. Durst. Do you agree that in the stipulated recording, the unedited stipulated recording, that the only words that are on that recording at that section are the 5 words, killed them all, of course?
I agree.
And would you agree, Mr. Durst, that those 5 words are extremely incriminating?
No.
No. Would you agree, Mr. Durst, that at the time that you said those words, you did not realize that you were being recorded?
Correct.
And would you further agree, by the way, in opening statement, Mr. Durst, it was related that you knew you were being recorded, and...
I don't know if the question is, but it's probably going to be objectionable.
Well, Mr. Durst, are you in any way alleging now that you did not know, I'm just strike that. Are you alleging now that you knew that you were being recorded?
We're talking about in the bathroom.
Yes.
I did not know I was being recorded in the bathroom.
And you would agree, Mr. Durst, correct, that Andrew Jarecki did not tell you to say, killed them all, of course, correct?
Correct.
And he did not tell you to say, there it is, you're caught, correct?
Correct.
And in fact, Mr. Durst, as you were sitting in that bathroom, after having been confronted with the Sereb note and the cadaver note, you actually thought when you walked in there that you were about to be arrested and charged with murder, didn't you?
No.
What did you think?
I thought that Andrew had proved beyond a reasonable doubt that I had written the cadaver note.
Mr. Durst, as you sit here right now, you have admitted to at least 5 instances of perjury while you were testifying in this case, correct?
No.
Mr. Durst, didn't you previously say, I asked you, how many instances of perjury have you committed during this trial? And you said you estimated 5, correct?
Correct.
So you are agreeing, admitting that to the best of your knowledge and memory, you have committed at least 5 instances of perjury while testifying at this trial, correct?
Correct.
And you have also said from the first day of your cross-examination that if you had killed Susan, you would lie about it, correct?
Correct.
You have said that if you had killed Kathy, you would lie about it, correct?
Correct.
You have said that if you had murdered Morris, you would lie about it, correct?
Correct.
I asked you at one point, Mr. Durst, well, Mr. Durst, given what you've said, how is a jury supposed to evaluate when you're telling the truth and when you're lying? Do you remember what your answer was to that question?
Yeah, I'll sustain it.
Mr. Durst,
I said something to the effect.
under what grounds, Your Honor?
Argumentative.
Mr. Durst,
Am I going to answer your
no,
question?
the judge sustained the objection, so you don't answer.
Oh.
Mr. Durst, as you sit here right now, given that you've now admitted to having already perjured yourself at least 5 times in this trial, and having said that you would perjure yourself regarding whether you killed Susan, whether you killed Kathy, whether you murdered Morris, can you explain how anybody is supposed to figure out when you're telling the truth and when you're lying?
They're supposed to use their life experiences to come to a conclusion about whether or not I killed Susan Berman.
And Mr. Durst, when I previously asked you that question, wasn't your answer, I don't know?
Oh, I don't remember you previously asking me the question, so I don't remember my answer.
Well, Mr. Durst, would you agree that if you were pressed as to how it is that anybody is supposed to be able to tell when you're telling the truth and when you're lying, that the only reasonable answer you can give is, I don't know?
Objection argumentative.
Sustained.
No, a reasonable answer was,
May we approach, Your Honor?
No, I sustained and struck that.
Yeah, no, that's what I want to approach.
About that?
What? No, about an issue that is.
Okay. Nuance. Exceptions. I think we got it ironed out.
So, Mr. Durst,
7 minutes ago.
Mr. Durst, so as you sit here, you are just about done with your cross-examination. And my question to you is that given that you have now admitted that you have perjured yourself at least 5 times during your testimony at this trial, and you have stated that you would perjure yourself to any question involving whether you killed Susan, whether you killed Kathy, or whether you killed Morris. That is what you have stated, correct?
Correct.
Overruled.
Can you explain then, Mr. Durst, given what you have just agreed has been your history of perjury while you have testified, and your statement that you will continue to perjure yourself regarding any of those 3 critical areas, how is anybody supposed to figure out when you are telling the truth and when you're lying?
They would have to use their life experiences to decide if what was brought up at this trial is meaningful in terms of whether or not I killed Susan Berman.
And would you agree, Mr. Durst, that given life experience, that it would be reasonable for somebody to look at your admissions that you have repeatedly perjured yourself, and that you have stated, I will continue to perjure myself regarding these important issues, to consider those statements and come to the conclusion that nothing that you say regarding your lack of involvement in Susan's murder, Kathy's murder, or Morris Black's murder can be believed?
Objection, argumentative.
Sustained.
They would have to use,
Sustained, right, Your Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Durst? Do you believe that given the admissions that you have made regarding perjury and your intent to commit future perjury, if the questions involve those 3 areas, do you think that it would be reasonable for somebody to say, you know what? I just can't believe what this guy says about anything that implicates himself in this case?
Objection, argumentative.
Sustained. Try again. You're close.
Well, I mean, that's it. I was trying to leave 5 minutes on the table, Your Honor.
That's so generous.
Yeah. Mr. Durst, would you agree that the admissions that you've made about your prior perjury are extremely relevant for somebody assessing your credibility?
Objection, argumentative.
Extremely relevant. Overruled.
yes, that is one of the items that they would take into consideration in deciding whether there's evidence that I killed Susan Berman.
And Mr. Durst, would you agree that in addition to considering your history of being untruthful during this case and how that impacts somebody assessing your credibility, would you agree, Mr. Durst, that there has been a significant amount of evidence that you have been confronted with while you have been testifying?
Upon the question, argument.
Overruled.
There has been some evidence. I don't think it's a significant amount of evidence.
Mr. Durst, would you agree that whether that is a significant amount of evidence or, as you have termed it, not a significant amount of evidence, that in order to assess the strength of that evidence, that somebody looking at it and evaluating it would have to consider your credibility as it relates to that evidence? Would you agree?
I would agree.
And would you agree, Mr. Durst, that if somebody looking at the evidence decided, you know what, Robert Durst has committed repeated perjury and is not credible, would you agree that that would and should affect somebody looking at the strength of the evidence against you? That is my last question, Your Honor.
I don't think so, because I'm sustaining it.
Can I ask the court the grounds on
Yeah, no, it's an argument. So try, I know you want to close with like a,
But he said that was his last question?
Well,
no,
it was.
that's
You can make a
hypothetical.
deal with me, Mr. DeGuerin, and I'll make it my last question.
That's hypothetical. You
All right.
why don't you just confront him with the ultimate questions?
Well-
It's fine. You can do it that way.
Your Honor,
Nope. Think fast.
all right. Mr. Durst, you have now conceded that you agree that your credibility is an extremely important part in assessing the strength of the evidence in this case, correct?
It's an important part.
Can you explain how it would not be extremely important?
I don't know the difference between important and extremely important.
Well, Mr. Durst, would you agree that in terms of the evidence that has been presented against you during this trial, that what you have done is to take pieces of evidence that are highly incriminating and to try and explain in your testimony why they are not as they appear to be or why they are not actually incriminating, correct?
Objection. Argument.
Overruled.
352.
Overruled.
That's what you've done, correct?
I don't think I've done that at all. I think I've dealt with what you call the extremely relevant evidence.
Would you agree, Mr. Durst, that if somebody looking at this case decides that, you know what, Bob Durst confessed to Nick Chabin, that if in fact that statement happened, you agree that's incredibly damaging, is that correct?
Objection. It's argument.
Overruled.
I have repeatedly said that I did not confess to Nicky Chabin.
And Mr. Durst, you would agree that if somebody listening to your audio where it says, killed them all, of course, decides that you said that and does not believe your explanation, that that is extremely incriminating, correct?
Killed them all, of course, sounds like it's part of a bigger sentence. And many of the quotes that came out of that bathroom are also pieces of sentences.
Except when you listen to the audio, all you hear, you would agree, Mr. Durst, are the 5 damning words, killed them all, of course, correct?
There's a whole lot more than I said in the bathroom.
Except no one can hear it except you, correct?
No, there were about a dozen different quotes about what I said in the bathroom.
Mr. Durst, this is my last question. As you sit here right now, I'm going to ask you, did you kill Susan Berman?
No,
But if you had, you would lie about it, correct?
correct.
Nothing further.
Thank you. Direct? No, I'm not going to do that. Not till tomorrow, and then I will. But folks, So juror number 4, you've got an appointment, and I'm going to excuse you now. I do need to follow up on something with a couple of you. So would you mind waiting just for a couple more minutes? I won't keep you very long, but I just do need to talk to you.
Your Honor, the court said tomorrow, but wait.
Tomorrow's Wednesday.
Tomorrow's Wednesday.
We're here tomorrow.
Yeah, no.
So I need to go sidebar. Yes, you guys.